Temple is a very weird one and very unique. They are a damage frame that is relatively squishy at times, but Temple has an ability that grants you invulnerability. But they also want to be a support frame, and then Temple gives you a really big global crit bonus that applies to you, your companions, and your allies as well, which allows for some really amazing synergies. Temple also grants you and your allies up to 750% heat damage, all while shredding everything with a flamethrower guitar, but I have no idea where to place Temple. They are kinda badass to be honest, and that's what DE was going for. Temple may definitely appeal to some, but they may not be for everyone because of Temple's passive, and I will go into that in a moment. There are two ways to go about playing Temple, which we will dive into later on in the video, but for now we will be talking about the 60th Warframe Temple and how to get Temple, as well as going over Temple's abilities. You can farm Temples through the new defense game mode called Stage Defense. Temple's main blueprint and components can also be acquired through Flair's memorabilia found in the Central Mall's pub by trading Beating Heartstrings, or you can just buy Temple for plat, it's up to you. Temple's passive is what I mentioned earlier to be the weird one. It's based on a metronome much like Octavia, and you have a bar that constantly moves. Casting your abilities in the sweet spot will invigorate them with ability effects, which will ultimately buff the abilities to make them stronger, while also giving you increased ability efficiency by 50%. This is the nice part of this passive, as this does seriously help with the energy sustain since Temple is inherently an ability spammer. The little middle part of the passive, which is the sweet spot, is known as the backbeat, which obviously ties into the musical theme of Temple. As you hit the sweet spot, you'll begin to charge a bar, which allows you to cast your fourth ability, which is your Exalted weapon, Lizzy, which is a flamethrower that actually shreds. The thing that is weird about my initial testing, now pause before we go on further, please do bear in mind that these are my initial thoughts on Temple. They may change in the future since, well, they have only been out for a couple of hours at this point. So yeah, the whole metronome sweet spot thing sounds good on paper, but I honestly find myself hardcore staring and locking in on the passive while forgetting to actually look at what's on my screen while I'm playing. This may be a skill issue on my part at least, but I do find it to be somewhat disruptive. I just know that my ADD does struggle with this. It's very tough. You may not agree with me, and that's fine. It's not the end of the world. I already started to get used to it by the end of recording this video, but it was just an initial gripe that I didn't really like, but it isn't a big deal breaker for me. Pyrotechnics is Temple's first ability. The sole purpose of this is to either prime with heat or build up your metronome bar so you can cast your Exalted weapon, which is your fourth. Do this yippee funny ass animation that will blast enemies with pillars of heat damage. If you hit the backbeat timer, you can ignite even more pillars, and you can increase the duration and heat damage of Ripper's Wail, which is your third. We will get into that in a little bit. Now, Pyrotechnics works on where you are aiming. However, the pillars can reach enemies behind Temple if enemies are close enough behind you. Pyrotechnics will cause enemies to panic with heat status effects every time they're refreshed, but it is a very quick CC, so it's not something to rely on. Temple's first is a quickfire spamming ability and is quite good for shield gating if you opt for that route, and is also a means to boost your damage from your third. However, the damage from your first itself is not that crazy unless you go all in on it with, let's say, Archon Vitality, Armor Stripping, Viral Priming, and so on. Overdrive is Temple's second, and this is the star of today's video. This is the only one we need to focus, people. This is because this one has got thick synergies. Place down speakers to blast enemies with a wave of heat damage while increasing their vulnerability to critical chance. But this is not tied to the crit chance on your weapons. It's a separate instance, so it's a huge bonus. If you hit the sweet spot, you double the crit chance that this gives, and increases the duration and heat damage of Ripper's Wail again when it deals damage. So again, your first and second is all about boosting Ripper's Wail, which we will get into in a moment. Now, what makes Overdrive so special is the simple fact that this crit bonus is global. This means you, your companion, your allies, and I haven't fully confirmed it yet, but potentially their companion too, global. This means you can essentially give everyone raid crits with enough strength, and of course if their weapon has high enough crit. This also means one of my favorite synergies with having Desiccation Subsumed and using the augment works even better, allowing your companions to almost reliably red crit. Temple is probably one of the few frames that can do this with your companions, so there are so many synergies to explore here, it's unreal. This ability as a whole is just red crits for days, and your second is also a good spamming ability. Then we have Ripper's Wail. Your first and second tie into buffing your third. Go into an animation ripping your guitar, becoming invulnerable while healing yourself and regenerating your shields to even max over shields. When you finish the 3-second animation, you will go back to normal. However, if you hit the sweet spot, you will then gain a 4-second bonus invulnerability period when you're done finishing with the animation. To top this off, you will then boost you and your allies in affinity range, which is 50 meters, with heat damage on your weapons. But each time an ability is used on the backbeat bonus, this will increase to 750% increased heat damage, and it increases the duration of Ripper's Wail. That's huge. That's a big bonus of damage. Increasing your strength will increase the amount of heat bonus it increases per backbeat bonus. The unfortunate thing about this is if you do want to subsume something like Raw, Eclipse, and Zata, you will only be able to subsume over Ripper's Wail, which means you lose the invulnerability, but it does make sense. Having both of these would be broken. You know, it makes sense. Ripper's Wail is literally just a damage boosting ability. Ripper's Wail is a weird one for me. For me personally, in almost all cases, abilities that force you to stop and stand still and lock you in an animation for a certain duration always just feels weird in Warframe and disrupts the flow. But this one is a slight exception in my opinion. It's somewhat okay, and you can technically cast this ability while mid-flight and aim glide to launch yourself while stuck in this animation, which kind of helps, but it does still feel weird. However, I can't deny the invulnerability can be very handy at times, but this is where I say Temple can be squishy. Yes, you can regain your health in an instant and maybe get 4 seconds of invulnerability if you hit the backbeat bonus, but outside of that, if you think about it, you're pretty squishy. Which of course means you have to mod your Warframe to help with this, which of course we do, because let's face it, unless you want to be stuck in this constant loop of being stuck in an animation to keep yourself alive, it is not the best in terms of a method to survive with a frame. No, you cannot animation cancel to my knowledge, and no, decreasing the duration to negative duration doesn't shorten the 3-second animation lock. So yeah, I tried that, doesn't work. Some of you may not agree with that take, but that's fine, these are just my thoughts. Temple's fourth is Exalted Solo, which lets you make use of your weapon Lizzy. Yes, your guitar is named Lizzy. Basically, have a guitar Ignis Wraith. When you hit backbeats from other abilities, you will charge the small bar, and when you do, you can then cast your Exalted Solo to pull out the Lizzy. This guitar does mainly heat damage, but if you aim with Lizzy, you can see at the bottom right, the abilities now switch to elements. And if you press the corresponding ability number, you will send out a wave that will apply those status effects, effectively playing the guitar. Now you can spam this as much as you want, like really quickly, and also if you do cast it in between the sweet spot, you will apply more status effects at a time. The element of choice of course comes down to what synergies you are running and what elements you have on Lizzy. If you hit the backbeat bonus while casting Lizzy, it will not consume any energy, but this only applies to the cast. Using Lizzy won't drain your energy like other Warframe Exalted weapons, which is very nice. Increasing your ability strength will also give Lizzy a damage multiplier. Now, at first, I thought this Exalted weapon was just another Exalted weapon that was kinda mid. But boy oh boy, was I wrong, baby. First things first, this weapon does mainly heat, but if you mod for another element, it will then add that element onto the waves that you will send out. So it can double up essentially, and it adds it separately. And of course, if you have Ripper's Wail active, you can still apply heat if you mod for a different element. Now, I had to mod for gas. Like, what else? Come on. You knew I was going to do that. Cast out viral waves, use Ripper's Wail for heat bonus, and Lord have mercy, this is glorious. Okay, so I tested 2 different ways to mod Lizzy so far, and I've gone all in on the gas energy, but the first way being this build right here, which is the multi-shot version, which I find to be slightly better. We mod for gas, which in a case like this isn't usually ideal since gas should be modded with something that hits less often, but hits hard. However, this actually works very well with your second and third. And then we have an acuity version of Lizzy, which works quite well against single target or just normal missions. I know many people are a fan of this playstyle, but they both work very well. This is a star chart version for the newer players watching this. Before we go further, could I ask that you smash that like button? Thank you so much, my lovely tenor. It really helps me out. Now, how do we play Temple? There are two ways to go about playing Temple. One, focus on your Exalted weapon, which is super fun, the Lizzy way, or focusing on buffing your weapons through your second and third. I will save this one for when we talk about Helminth setup, since you will subsume off your fourth for this. The first way is fairly straightforward. Use your 1 and 2 as a means to charge up your Exalted by timing the backbeat. Use your second frequently to keep your increased crit chance against enemies in front of you. Cast Ripper's Wail as an oh shit button to regain your health when it's low and to get the heat damage bonus. Cast your 1 as a means to stun enemies, and cast your 4th. Please remember that when you have built up the bar a bit, you can use your Exalted weapon at any given time. You can also consistently keep it up by not aiming and casting your abilities as per normal by hitting the backbeat bonus to keep the bar up. You're effectively just refreshing the charges as if it was like an encore weapon that you could recharge. That's how you could do it basically. If you are still using the base setup and just want to focus on weapons, then of course that works too. You can essentially use any weapon since you get a huge crit bonus as well as a massive heat damage bonus. Temple is a brilliant weapons platform, but any weapon that has a naturally high crit damage multiplier will benefit the most from the synergy. So what would a build look like? For the newer players or Star Child players, this is what the setup would look like. Then for Steel Path players, this is what that version would look like. For both setups, we focus on strength, a bit of range, and a bit of duration. For the Steel Path, I did opt for Adaptation and Arcane Guardian for a bit of a health tank setup, but you can go for a shield tanky setup, which would be Adaptation, Redirection, and Arcane Aegis, or you can go for a Rolling Guard setup, whichever tickles your fancy. It's just one of the ways to keep yourself alive. However, remember, Ripper's Wail is your oh shit button, but you do need a little bit of boost from the modding to keep yourself alive when you don't want to keep recasting Ripper's Wail. Okay, that covers a no Helminth setup. Let's talk about the Helminth versions now. For a nice survivability setup, I subsumed Shooting Gallery onto our first. We then use Muzzle Flash to crowd control every enemy in a 20 meter plus radius. This helps us if we focus on our Exalted. A nice pillage setup for those who really like armor stripping and regaining our shields. And we also have an evade setup for those who like invisibility playstyles and want to go for headshots. And lastly, we have my favorite, the desiccation setup, since our second ability buffs our companions and allies, which means all of our pets will deal orange and red crits reliably. Definitely give this a go. It's very niche but super fun. With all of the Helminth setups that I've just mentioned to you, you can actually flip them around and subsume over your Exalted instead and just focus on your actual weapons and loadout. This ties into the second way to play Temple, and like I mentioned earlier, pretty much any weapon can be really good with Temple, and any weapon with high crit damage. It's not tied to, one specific weapon. The usual suspects are going to be good with Temple, the ones you see in almost every video where people suggest weapons. But that's pretty much the two ways to play Temple. I personally really enjoy Temple's Exalted, so I will keep to that. For Archon shards, I would suggest at least one casting speed shard. If you don't like running Equilibrium, you can use purple shards to replace that, and you can also use some strength and duration shards, whatever tickles your fancy. When it comes to the companions, honestly, if you're using the desiccation setup, Panzer Volperfiler or the Adaza Kavat to further increase your crit is also really, really fun. And then also you could just use any priming at like pet. Companions are really up to you. It's not that easy to suggest one companion. For my final thoughts on Temple. Temple is weird but unique, like I mentioned. Actually, Temple is really good considering the synergies with your second and third alone. But Temple may not be for everyone, and they are certainly not bad by any means. In fact, I'm really excited to see how far I can push Temple in the future. But it's definitely worth the former an investment. I just don't like the passive and the lock-in animation from the third. That's my only gripes with Temple so far. Overall, a solid frame that looks to be pretty niche so far, but really fun and very, very interactive. Thank you all for watching the video. I hope you enjoyed it. Goodbye, my lovely tenor. Enjoy Temple. I will see you all in the next one.